10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I think we're all pretty familiar with that parable of the talents. So we want to explore a little bit what it means to be active. Of the 3 servants, how many were active in that sense? 2. And 1 decided to be kind of docile, or what is that big bird? An ostrich? A little bit ostrich-like. They buried their head in the sand and just hoped things would go away, basically. So, let's explore a few key messages here. Now, the master gives each servant an amount of money. Now, just for context, not that it's relevant to the message, but what is a talent? What did he give in terms of talent? So, it wasn't until about the 15th century or so that talent started being known as kind of a physical ability, or an ability that we have. Prior to that, it was an amount of money, at least according to the book here. And a talent was a large amount of money, essentially. So in those days, a denarius was about a day's wage, or denarii, or however you pronounce that. It was about a day's wage. A talent was somewhere in the range of 6,000 to 10,000 denarii. More than an average worker would see in a lifetime. 1 talent. So he gave 5 to one of these guys. He gave 2. So 5 lifetimes of income. 2 lifetimes of income, or just 1 lifetime of income. Okay, that's okay. But think about that. Somebody comes and hands you, I don't know, pick a number, $10 million. I need you to hold on to this for me. Okay. Anything special you want me to do with it? I mean, your first inclination is, I'm sitting here holding $10,000. I need to get this in a safe. Somebody's going to be knocking me on the back of the head and taking this, and I'm accountable for this. Each servant in this case was expected to use his portion of the money to earn more, to be a steward of what was given to them. So, we can draw some judgments from the master's reaction in this parable into the expectation, right, that might be given to us. Clearly, there was an expectation to do more than simply hide what they're given or put it in a safe. After all, it was his money, not theirs. Now, that's the thing we face today. And probably then, if we go back to our $10 million example, how tempting, and I will argue with anybody that tells me it's not, how tempting is it to say, I might not miss $1 million of this? Because it is. That's as much or more money than most of us will see in a lifetime. And never all at once. So, how tempting would it have been for them to take those 5 talents, especially the guy that earned 5 more, and say, look, master, I earned you 4. So there's that temptation to overcome. And the trust that's being tested, maybe. I don't know what your take is on that, but the trust that's established. And we've got several examples of what has happened to when that trust is violated, right? But since that money did not belong to them, they didn't get to decide what to do with it on their own. If they didn't do what was expected, there would be consequences. Then the choices of each servant reveal their effort to fulfill their master's purpose. They knew their master, in this case, I'm going to say was a gainful business person, right? An aggressive business person. That every dollar, every effort, every seed, everything that they did was designed to gather more, right? Everything was an investment. And in the business world, if you're going to spend a minute on something, that minute needs to reap something back, right? Otherwise, you're wasting productivity. So everything is an investment. So what was their intent with this investment? So all three of them now, to their credit, overcame that urge that I talked about earlier. None of them pocketed any bit of it. But what was their intent? How active were they? You know, the significance here, when we make the parallel or the conversion from talent being a financial discussion, which that's not what this is about. It's not about finances. It's about activity for the Lord, right? So when we make that conversion, it's interesting. The parallels to the servants that received 5 or 2 talents. Both of them were very active. You could argue were equally as active. I could almost argue the guy that had 2 might have had to do a little more because you don't have as much to invest. The more you have to invest, it's easier to get more back. But the guy that had 1, what parallel do we draw to today? Mm-hmm. So I think lazy's a good word. Was he faithful?
Well, he didn't do what the master had said for him, each according to his ability.
Right. But he didn't disobey the master. I mean, he didn't. He still knew the master, believed the master, was still participating, returning back equally, right? So it's not like he was, I don't know, for lack of a better term, evil, right? He didn't blatantly disobey, if you understand what I'm saying.
He was not involved.
Right.
In what was set before him.
He was not active. He was not involved. He did not engage himself in what was expected. He was given a talent. Now, granted, he wasn't given as much as the other 2, but he was given something. And he was expected to have used that something for his master. Comments, questions, thoughts?
Well, like you told him, he should, if he wasn't going to do anything, he should invest it just where he could draw in.
At the least.
At the very least. He had to do something with it, but he did not. He buried it in the ground.
Yes. And that is, and I can't speak to the time, right? I don't know what the mentality of a bank was versus, and I don't know how a bank operated back then, but apparently there was enough similarity that there was interest-bearing accounts that he could have invested in. So there was something. So the mentality to literally bury it in the dirt versus investing it in a bank. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know stories of folks when I was younger where, some folks that actually were loosely related to me. Well, I guess we had some, they attended here, but when they had a house after they passed away that was being torn down by family, and they found money in the walls just because instead of investing it or doing anything, he didn't trust banks. He'd stick it in his mattress. He had it tucked in the walls. And they still don't know. They probably lost a lot of it because they just didn't find it. So I don't understand that part of it. But going along with the story, I mean, what's the point? You stick it in a wall. What's that do? You stick it in the ground. What's that do for you? Well, you got it. Now, I don't want to get into finances, but very, very quickly over, if I stick it in the ground, Alan, for 5 years, is it worth as much when I pull it back out as it was when I put it in? No, right?
Because whatever it would have made is gone.
Well, it just the value of money changes over time, right? It declines over time. So you're losing by sticking it into the ground. So I don't know. I don't know the mentality. I don't get it. And I think part of that's the point of the story is they're not being good stewards of what the master laid out for them. So any thoughts on these messages? Yes, sir. That's right. So there are people that will say, I believe. I'm a good person, right? But there's nothing else behind it. They're not doing anything with that belief.
Well, that draws right back to where the Bible says that we all have talents, and each member of the church has a different talent.
You're getting ahead of me. You want to trade? No, that's exactly right. That's exactly where we're going to go when we talk about these focus points of the lesson. Is the same situation exists today, right? God has taken action by giving us resources to use for Him. We have resources, not just talents. We all have talents. We're gonna touch on that. What resources do we have? What's a resource that's available to us that wasn't available back then? The Word, your Bible. I can pretty quickly search through whatever I want now. You've got Bible in electronic form. I can go straight to it. You've got Bible in written form. It's consistent. We've got the structure of the church, right? So we have church leadership and ministering as is designed biblically to help instruct and guide us. We have leadership in the eldership so that if we're given a talent, we have direction on how to go use that talent to generate returns for our master. Any other thoughts? So let's explore some of these. So 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12. Somebody's got that and wants to read it. Anybody got it? Okay.
For as the body is one, and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ.
So, what does that mean? We have different members that are part of one body. Say it a different way. We have different functions, skill sets, but we're part of one body. What does that mean?
Each member has a different function. And the eye can't be the hand, or the hand can't be the eye or the ear. It is what it is.
Right.
And it has a specific function that is necessary for the body to be a whole body.
We have complementary talents, right? Not opposing. For one, in terms of the mission that we are given by God, the expectation that He sets forth for us, or He has set for us, we have complementary talents, meaning one cannot accomplish it without the other. I didn't put it in there, but let's skip ahead and read 15 through 18 just to continue, and that continues on kind of what we've said. Starting with verse 15, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where would be the smelling? But now God has set the members, each one of them in the body, just as He pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? We have differing skills, differing resources, differing talents that we are given that complement each other. That's why we're pulled together in this body. That's why there's not one supreme leader, if you will, whose mission is to go out and do everything. There was one. We'll talk about him, but his mission wasn't to go out and do everything. His mission was to go out and charge us, to give us the resources that we need. And then he becomes the head, the leader of the body. Okay, the master held each servant accountable only for what he had been given. The one who had 2 talents was not expected to invest 5. He was only expected to use what he had. Likewise, God holds us accountable for what we've been given. Right? If we turn over to Romans 12, take a look at, I think I've got 1 through 2 up there, but we're gonna go all the way through 8. So Romans 12, and just for sake of time here, I'm gonna read this, so if you could follow along. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. For I say, through through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. So, to pause right there. Number 1, in verse 1, I think we are given our assignment. Are we? Does anybody else see that? We are given our expectation in verse 1. You present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. That is the expectation that is set for us. Is it lowly? No, not at all. It's quite demanding. A living sacrifice. That scares me. Right? That's a lot. That's a lot that's being asked of us. Does that mean we should take a casual approach and use these resources that are provided to us as we have time? Quite the opposite. And I can speak for myself. I feel like a lot of us are guilty of maybe flipping that. We do the as we have time thing pretty often, which goes back to the first lesson that we had in this series, being mindful. We have got to realize where we're at, what we're doing, keep sober-minded, if you will, which is what it says here, so that we keep ourselves on point, on mission. So moving on, starting with verse 4 here. For as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function, so we, being many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another, having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. Or ministry, let us use it in our ministering. He who teaches, in teaching. He who exhorts, in exhortation. He who gives, with liberality. He who leads, with diligence. He who shows mercy, with cheerfulness. The abilities and opportunities that we have are gifts from God. We do not deserve them. And we certainly did not earn them by anything that we might have done. They are blessings from God, and He calls us to be good stewards. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Anybody disagree? Come on, give me an argument. Somebody. I'd be right there with you. I'd be right there with you. Probably so.
The thing that has to, every blessing that is given to you is given for your use to bring those talents. You are the people around you. You are to influence them in a way that is righteous and serving God. Your light is to show so those people can see the Lord living in you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use that consciously every day, you serve the Lord every day of your life. It is the part of you that you have taken on to serve. And through serving, you become more Christ-like. Every step you take through your life, you become more Christ-like until you reach as far as you can go. May fall short, but as long as you're trying. The servant with the talent, if he fell on his face crying, he may have been a whole different ballgame.
That's right.
Because he could have asked for forgiveness.
He would have had something.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
he didn't. He buried.
Right.
You know.
Well, the second half of this lesson that unfortunately it's not looking like I'm going to get to again because I'm not going to rush it, is confidence. So just to give you a little bit of a lead into that, the confidence is that when we are doing God's work, failure is not an option. He is with us. He will succeed for us. We may experience temporary setbacks here. If we are serving His purpose, He will gain the victory. Now, but what you said, I'm going to just make a little bit of application. So, everybody has a talent. We're expected to gain. Well, I'm not a teacher. I can't get up and speak to people. I'm not very good talking to people. What's my talent? What's my contribution? What can I do?
You can be something of value to that person to lead him to the Lord. We're not all fully standing at the same time. We are at different levels in our relation to God. You lead with where you're at. If it's with one talent, you lead with the one talent. If it's with 10 talents, you lead with 10 talents.
And on purpose, by design, what we just read, some of us got one talent, and it's not public speaking. It's not whatever you imagine that you need it to be in order to be effective, if you will. And I'm going to name off some things, and I hope I don't do it. I'm not trying to do anything offensively, so I don't want anybody to say. But maybe you're not comfortable talking to anybody, but you can cook. Okay. Is there an opportunity to influence and serve the Lord by cooking? I think there's a few people in here that ought to be raising their hand. Right? Now, I'm not saying that anybody is one talent, right? That's not what I'm saying. But I don't know. Maybe I really can't cook. The only thing I can do halfway well is draw. Can I draw and serve the Lord? I don't know. When's the last time anybody has been back into the kind of the youth classes, the child classes? You ever see the workbooks that they work out of? A lot of the younger kids don't read that well. How do they get messages? Through artwork and teaching. You can use drawing. I'm just picking on a couple of points. There are talents that are out there that have been given to us individually. I couldn't draw my way. I couldn't draw anything. I can't draw a stick man. But for whatever reason, I feel somewhat comfortable speaking. That wasn't even always the case, but hopefully I'm doing it effectively. If I'm not, please give me feedback on how to get better. But use what you have. Use what you have, what you've been given, in the best way that you can use it. That's what this is saying. So we must take action by using these resources for His glory. So Luke 12, verse 42. through 48. It says, "And the Lord said, Who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his master will make ruler over his household, to give them their portion of food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, that he will make him ruler over all that he has. But if that servant says in his heart, My master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and be drunk, the master of that servant will come on a day when he's not looking for him, and in an hour when he's not aware, and will cut him into and appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. And that servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself to do according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. To whom much has been committed, much will be required. The expectation of us is to provide a return to our Lord comparable to what He has given to us. Some of us here are multi-talent individuals. Some of us can teach, preach, are very good in social kind of personal communication and environments, one-on-one kind of environments. They can sing, they can do a lot of things. The expectation on them is higher. Just plain and simple. Sorry, that's you. But the expectations are higher because more has been given. If somebody can do the one thing, what would their expectation be? It would be to use that, find how to use that one thing. Granted, this is hyperbole, but if all I can do is bounce a ball, my responsibility is to go find how I can bounce that ball for the Lord. Does that make sense? That's the expectation on me. Mindfully, I've got to set my mind to finding how I can use that talent or my many talents. I've got to self-assess. I've got to establish and understand what have I been given and develop those talents and how to use them.
You know, the Bible teaches very plainly, you seek wisdom, pray for it. Anything that you want and need to do to help the Lord, ask Him. He will grant to you the ability that you're asking for. Maybe not in the way that you want to be, very, very talented, but He will grant to you through that need to do the will that He wants done.
That's right. I'm going to close out, and then I'm going to hit a couple of discussion questions, and then we'll wrap this up in the last minute here. When we go back to the one-talent servant, the way that when you go back to the original text, according to this author, he said, "See, you have what is yours," was his response to his master. But we don't necessarily understand the tone. So the suggestion here is that reflected a disrespectful attitude that denied responsibility. In this world today, one of the biggest issues I see, and I do some battle with my kids sometimes, when everything's always somebody else's fault, right? I would tell you that UK lost last night because of the refs. It was the refs' fault. But that's not taking responsibility for what they didn't do, is it? So it's so easy to blame somebody else. It was somebody else, and not take responsibility for what we need to do. I think that's a big problem in the world today. And that's what was going on with this single talent servant. They didn't take responsibility. And in fact, it became disrespectful in that they said, here's yours. So you get yours. There we go. So things to think about, and we don't necessarily have time to talk through it. Why would it be tempting to hide a talent instead of investing it? Fear. You're going to get yelled at if you lose it. I mean, you definitely don't want to lose it. But
Well, I think you set the stage when you said, "Oh, you know, for not sowing and reaping where you haven't sown, and this is why for you."
Right.
He set the stage for what the answer was.
What are some fears or obstacles that might prevent us from using what's been given to us? And the context, and here's where I don't mean this to come across the wrong way, but some of us come to church every week, and we sit in the pews, and we listen to the lesson. It's good. We leave, and we don't do anything bad, but we don't use any talents. And then we come in the next week, and we sit here, and we go home.